research. What I will accomplish in this lecture is a quick visit to the WebCT site to demonstrate a few additional features of that. There will be an additional viewing of some features specifically for the presentation of the case studies in the next lecture. And then after the short visit to the WebCT site, I'll point out some components of the first textbook that I want you to take a look at, and then we will go through the PowerPoint presentation for the first lecture on the first half, basically, of the first chapter in that textbook 1. So I'll switch to the computer. And show you the one addition at this point. I've added a link here, the PDF lecture files. So this is the file for today, and I'll add the lectures, all the lectures for the course there. Eventually they will be all there as PDF. That's one slide per page. Basically what I've done is I've taken the same PowerPoint presentation file and used Adobe to print it with the one slide per page. Sometimes the Adobe works better than the PowerPoint for loading. I'll get all these other lectures posted over there as Adobe as well, and you'll see them appear throughout the semester. Let me go back to this for just a moment. So as we do Lecture 1, Chapter 1, Lecture 2, Chapter 1, this will be the lecture that will be pre-recorded from an independent system, not from this lecture hall, and will be supplemental to that. And as noted in the syllabus and in the first lecture on the orientation, for each of these lectures, whether it's here from this classroom or separately, from other instrumentation where it's just the PowerPoint and the pointer and my voice, not me and the picture in the picture. There will be a quiz generated for each one of those, and you will have to take that quiz and complete all of those quizzes to get as part of the requirements for completing, getting completion credit for this course. The other thing I want to point out at this time is that once I establish exactly how we can either use the chat room feature or the discussion feature, or maybe both, of the communications, eventually you'll be posting your own schedule for your case studies. So I wanted to come to the calendar here just to demonstrate how you would do that. So if you pick a date that you are planning to begin to post it, it doesn't have to correspond to any class day because it's all through the WebCT. You'll just click on the blue number for that date and then on Add Entry. And it's very important that here below you click on the public selection so that when you post it, everybody will be able to see it. If you click private, then it's only your calendar. When you go into the WebCT and you open it, you'll see both the public that everybody's posted and your own private entries to the calendar. You just type in the information and then click Add to add it there. When you're in the views, whether it's weekly or monthly, you have this choice of compiling the entries. And you can compile either the public entries or the private entries. Here I'm going to compile both, and there was nothing there because none of us have entered anything into the calendar yet. But once it's there, you can compile. So if you just wanted to compile to see what you've entered into your private calendar, just to kind of catch up on everything, that would be one way to go about it. You may not have tremendous use for the private part of this calendar. I should have the deadlines in there, though, didn't I? That's strange that the deadlines for the assignments and the case studies didn't show up when I compiled. Compile entries. Oh, because I've got it from September 1 to September 1. So let's do August 1 to December. So it's important to set the date. Okay, now we've got all the entries in there. So it'll bring up all the entries. These are both public and private. And right now they're all public because I posted them there for you. In addition, you'll see that under the streaming video lectures, each will be posted as it's recorded. So at the end of the lecture, I'll be able to post it, and as soon as they finish completing the file in the control room, then they'll drag it to the target folder, and the link that I'll add at the end of class will be activated. I sent an email to everyone today reminding you that attendance is not required. All that's required is that you view each lecture and complete the quiz that's posted for that lecture, and complete all of your assignments and participate, of course, according to the syllabus, in the case studies as they are posted. My intention for this course in this semester is to record all of the lectures and have it become a standalone online course. And as we're going through the semester, this first semester of recording it, it can function the same way. So I give you the freedom of choice for that. This is a course on the responsible conduct of research. Taking the time to run across campus and all over campus or all over the city for some individuals to attend a lecture in a classroom is not always the most responsible way to take care of the conduct, to take care of your research, conducting your research at the bench. So this is the philosophy behind that. As we proceed to the point of entering or posting case studies and thinking about how to comment on them, I mean, it should be just a free flow of ideas. There's no right or wrong way to evaluate the case studies. We will talk about ethical decision making, and the same procedure basically will be used for making ethical judgments. But the online discussions about the case studies should be open. You should feel free and comfortable about it, and just let the ideas flow so that we get to share information in the way that we view things. I mean, if you happen to be really unethical and you're putting a lot of controversial things on there, I guess you'll be revealing something about yourself, but I don't suspect that many people are so horrendous. But I do want to draw your attention to in the textbook 1, which is of course what the majority of the lectures will be coming from originally until we get to the experimental design component of the course, is in the appendix, in Appendix 1, there's information on the Office of Research Integrity, the model policy. So I'm just going to switch to that real quick. So it starts on page 295, and it's really this final part. You should look it over, but what I want you to look at mostly is the institutional review and decision, and institutional, where to go? Administrative actions, and then of course the other considerations are important as well. For example, restoration of a respondent's reputation. So if someone is accused, if there's an allegation of misconduct of science, and after the investigation none of the evidence supports the allegation, well, you just went through all this stuff at your institution of having to produce all of your records and all those types of things. There's a lot of social attention brought to an individual in cases like that, and it's a tremendous effort to try to clear your record. Everyone seems to remember what happened rather than what you have accomplished. And that's not such a great situation to be in. So now let's switch over to the lecture on the first chapter on the responsible conduct of research. But really what we're going to be looking at is scientific research and ethics. So the first chapter, lecture 1, really is very introductory. It builds on the idea of why we have a course like this. It is essentially mandatory. If you read over the preference, there's some very interesting comments in there as to the federal government imposing a mandate that these would be required. As I had stated in the introductory lecture, in essence they are required, but it is not a federal mandate. A federal mandate had been put in place close to 2000, 1999, 2000, 2001 when Bush came in. That was removed and has not been imposed since then. So we know that in science, and we've been living in science our whole lives, and we've seen in recent years many ethical problems, issues, and dilemmas. And one outside of the biological sciences that is recent, of course, is travel to outer space, with faulty equipment where foam keeps falling off. Should we be sending human beings up in this equipment where the foam keeps causing the problems? Can we resolve that? So issues like this we know are coming up all the time. And it's very important to have some foundation to deal with them, and that's what we'll get into in the second part of this series of lectures on Chapter 1. Now we'll just have this introductory information to make us think about why we ask questions, how we ask questions, and just really establish an overview to appreciate ethics and morality. So these problems, issues, and dilemmas are happening all the time, and it leads us to ask the question, as we've stated before, what should I do? And it really is, what ought I do? What am I obligated to do, in other words? Or what can I do? Do I have any options? And that's the key distinction that we have to develop throughout the course. When is there a choice and when is there not a choice? So if you observe or detect misconduct in science, are you obligated to follow the appropriate procedures, or do you have a choice? And that's the key part about that. Just switch to local on both here. Professional researchers are frequently, as we know, faced by ethical problems and issues. And this has to do with science becoming or achieving such a prominent level in society, world society, and we're always seeing some type of scientific discovery or conflict in the news. So there is the more direct impact on society and the attention. So the responsibility and accountability are the key aspects of the new approach to training people that work in scientific settings. So it's not just the scientific professionals, the people with PhDs and with master's degrees. It's technical staff, students, graduate, undergraduate, postdoctoral trainees, whatever the task or duties of the individuals, there has to be some understanding of what the rules and regulations are controlling behavior and responsibility and accountability. So there are many different cases, as you see in the textbook, and these are some of the case studies that you have as an option to basically to retype or type in a slightly different or expanded format and to present. You're a graduate student in pharmacology at a large university working under the direction of a senior researcher. you notice that the data doesn't match the figure in a paper, what should you do? So here it is. Are you obligated to take action? What are the steps that you should take? And there are several cases that we have in the next couple of slides, and I won't bother to read all of them, but some of the key questions are, as I said, are you obligated to act? And what are the possible repercussions? So how do you protect the whistleblowers is a very key part of this whole ethical question. What's the morality of protecting individuals who bring infractions to our attention, misconduct to our attention, and is it even possible? How are you protected? If you're a scientist or a technician at a bench and an allegation is made against you, how do you protect yourself? There's, for example, in Texas, there's the Texas Faculty Association, there's the American Association of University Professors. They provide some legal protection, and so there are the professional societies and things like that. But when trouble happens, you're on your own. No one comes running to the assistance of someone when there's trouble. It's more likely that people are going to back away and distance themselves from someone who is singled out by an allegation. So whether you're the whistleblower or the person that has been accused, you have to take care of yourself in the end, and there's probably more protection for a whistleblower than for the person being accused. So if someone is found guilty of misconduct in science, what are the possible sanctions that can be taken against them? Now, if there are no laws that are broken, there may not be any type of a fine or jail sentence that would go along with it. So they're really professional and social sanctions that can be imposed on someone found guilty of the misconduct. So, what might these be? So as I'm discussing the case studies for you and you go looking, what you'll find is that most case studies are open-ended like these in the textbook, and they just want this free flow of thought, and you don't have all the details, you don't have all the information, you really don't know what the outcome could be because there's so many possible variations on the theme of what all the details are. So I hope that you do take some time to look for case studies, maybe posted on National Institutes of Health, or whatever other postings there might be, where they've actually listed what the sanctions were. So really, what could happen to someone in science if they are found guilty? Are they put in jail? Are they fined? Did they have to pay back all the research money? Did they lose their job? What really would happen? So in the appendix at the end of the textbook, you can see what some of the possible sanctions might be, and then compare that to what might be posted. Are these postings blacklists? It's really a very interesting aspect of this whole new realm of science. I sure wouldn't like to have my name posted there. I don't do things that are unethical, so I shouldn't end up there. But that certainly would feel like you were blacklisted if your name was posted there, is the point being made. But otherwise, there is social sanction. There's shame, embarrassment, social retraction. All of those things that impact you emotionally as well as professionally are a big part of it. So how can you ever show your face again in science if you have been found guilty? But some people do end up in trouble, and they push on. They survive the more professional sanctions, maybe of not being able to receive public dollars to support their funding for a certain number of years or whatever it may be. They push on and they survive. So there's several examples in the textbook. I kind of like this one. You're an associate professor, in anthropology, planning to teach a course in herbal medicine and the world cultures. Will your students object to buying a textbook that you wrote? And it's interesting the way it's written by the authors. This professor thinks that that's the best book in the market. Of course they're going to think that, right? But is it ethical to force the students to buy the book that you wrote, and you're going to receive some profit from that? So it extends far from the bench even when we're considering examples of this. Let me do something here. I just realized that you're not getting the, there we go. It was the scan conversion that you were getting up there before. It skips about every 10 or 15 lines. I also liked to point out this one here. You're a director of the Department of Comparative Medicine at a medical school associated with the University Medical Center. And this individual is also the chair of the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee. Should you talk to the press about how animals are treated at your institution if you are on the committee that oversees animal treatment? And the answer to this question is varied, but one thing that we should always remember as we are students of an institution, UTSA, and especially faculty of the institution, employees, or employees otherwise, possibly research staff, it's always a good idea to check with the Public Relations Office before you have any type of formal contact with reporters or any other type of public representative, and make sure that you double check with the institution that anything you might say would be acceptable and appropriate. I know this seems to be quite guarded and almost would seem to be underhanded, but it is very important. Whenever, especially as a research scientist for an institution and faculty member for an institution like UTSA, when you're in the public, you represent that institution. You can't separate yourself from that. When you comment professionally, you reflect not only the profession, but the institution with which you are employed. And of course, being a state employee, you're also representing the UT system and the state. So it's important to keep that in mind. It's very difficult to separate yourself and your personal comments, however exact or perfect or imperfect they may be, from your commitments as the research scientist and expert, such as serving on an institutional committee for compliance with research requirements. And again, this is the continuing rephrasing of my disclaimer that this course isn't going to convert you into being a philosopher and an expert, and you should always be guarded whenever you enter into a situation where there might be debate about some issue in science, and keep your guard up and be careful. Deciding not to comment is sometimes the best route to take. Ethical conduct is an important part of research, and why scientists? Why were scientists not included in these types of considerations in past years, and why so much are they included now? So it's a cooperative enterprise now. The individual scientist doesn't stay in a laboratory for 6-8 years and then write this giant monograph as a sole author anymore that may or may not have been peer reviewed. It's very different now. So individual responsibilities and group responsibilities, collective responsibilities, the institution, the funding agencies are all represented, and it is placed, of course, within the social context. The standards of conduct in research play a key role, as we know, in advancing the goals of science, promoting cooperation, collaboration, and trust among researchers. And this, again, is key if someone is accused and then found innocent, has the trust been compromised, attaining the public's trust and support as well. So the researchers need some understanding of the ethical and social dimensions of the research, obviously. So it's important to ensure the ethical conduct is an essential part of basic applied and clinical research. And now, obviously, it's become incorporated into the training, the professional training. We have, again, a course such as this one. The idea that ethics is an important part of research is by no means new. The examples in the text, Nazi research on humans, is it ethical to look at any of this research? And if there's anything that might be of value, can we use it? Are we obligated to exclude that from our knowledge base because it was so immoral in the approach to collect that research data? Research on the atomic weapons, a very obvious one, dangers of pesticides, unethical research involving human subjects, such as the Willowbrook experiments, where children were exposed to a hepatitis virus. They weren't fully informed of the risk. They may not have received appropriate medical care. And this is true of the Tuskegee syphilis study as well. If you haven't heard of these, you might want to investigate them. The Willowbrook is covered in more detail in a later chapter in the textbook. But there's plenty of examples of where the rules and regulations are much more relaxed in the past, and we do have the data, we do have the information, and it's actually used. In speaking with a psychologist, there is, I've actually forgotten what it was called. It's the white rabbit phenomenon or something like that, but it exposed a young child to a rabbit, supposed to be, cute and cuddly and everything, but then associated it with a very negative type of stimulus. And then, of course, the child, whenever it would see the rabbit, would be very frightened of it. And that's a horrible experiment, but it's done, and we know about it. And they were able to reverse, to desensitize the children in that research study as well. So it's an integral part of understanding human psychology and using desensitization techniques, but it's based upon what seems to be a very unethical experiment. Wasn't really considered in that category when it was done, but now that we look at it, certainly it was. So, where is that cutoff point? The slippery slope is one of the key terms in the philosophy of ethics. Once you let things start sliding a little bit, if you use that, why can't you use the data that was produced by the Nazi research? So these are ways of thinking about these. If you allow anything to happen, then do you open the door to allow everything to happen? So modern research is not a solitary activity. There's collaboration and peer review. It's never performed in isolation anymore. If it is, and it remains in isolation, then there's no utility to it, except to the individual doing it. So that's just a very bizarre thing. Completely unexpected. So it does become a social product, a public product, at some point along the way. It always takes place in the social context. So there's various social, economic, cultural, religious, political interests that influence research goals, resources, and practices. So science is supposed to be completely objective, all based upon empirical observations and structured interpretations based upon those empirical observations. There isn't supposed to be opinion included in it. There are not supposed to be any coercion, no outside influencing factors. Well, it just isn't quite so pure in reality. When your paycheck relies on being a successful scientist, how can you say there's no external factor impacting your research productivity? Publish or perish. So these are realities that cannot be excluded from the big picture. But when it comes time to do the research, it should be objective. So how do we create that separation? How do we sustain it? And still, it's the individual that is responsible, the researcher that is there at the time that's doing it, the technician at the bench, the doctoral student designing the experiments and presenting that to the PI themselves, the collaborators. So everyone is accountable and responsible for their contribution, good or bad. One of the biggest challenges facing the scientists today is how to conduct that objective research despite all of these external influencing factors that we had mentioned. Because the science takes place in society again, we strive to earn the public support and trust. Compromise it on an individual basis, and all of science is compromised to some degree. So there's been obviously many highly publicized, politically charged events that have made the television or newspapers or magazines and draws attention to the importance of the ethics. So allegations of fraud, priority disputes, questions about authorship and ownership, conflicts of interest, poor record keeping, debates over clinical trials, use of animals in research, secret government radiation experiments, new developments in human genetics, new developments in agricultural biotechnology. This is a part that I'm trying to work over time to expand within this course. Now that we have the doctoral program in cell molecular biology in the Department of Biology, and more faculty that do research in plant biology, am asked to add to this. And I'll make every effort to continue to add in that context. But a quick question: have you ever consumed a genetically modified food? We may have. We just go to the store and buy them. I don't think they're labeled. Maybe I ate a genetically modified tomato. Who knows? So what's the ethical impact of that? And how does it interface with nature is very important to all of us. IQ research, important policy debates involving science research. So we're all aware of one thing or another relative to the significance of research ethics. So science's evolving relationship with the private industry is also very important in setting up behavioral guides, codes of ethics, as we'll see when we talk about science as a profession. Tight regulations on what is allowed and what is not allowed. With this being the year 2005, I'm just assuming that 10 years from now we'll still be using these streaming videos, so throw that date in there. Only recently, the National Institutes of Health has changed some of its regulations for the types of consulting and financial benefits that the intramural scientists with NIH can receive. There are some instances of individuals receiving substantial amounts of money, hoping from external sources outside of NIH, possibly seeking some type of favoritism or who knows what. But it's just reaching the attention of the media, and it is now being questioned whether it's acceptable and ethical or possibly legal. So the relationship has raised many ethical issues in research because the academic values of objectivity and openness frequently clash with the business interests of profit and competitiveness. So if you are a scientist working for an institution such as an academic institution here at UTSA, and you dedicate time and effort during your 8-hour workday, your 40-hour work week, toward an idea and a potential product that could be patented, licensed, and marketed for a profit, and you use some of the equipment and space, even computers to correspond, phones and things like that of the institution, and then go off and start a company and use that idea and that product to patent it, license it, market it, and make a profit. Is that ethical? Is it legal? Actually, as you should know, it is not legal, because if you use the research institution's resources to whatever degree, then you must negotiate with the institution to that degree what benefit they are going to request from any potential profit or actual profit. So this is a very important thing to understand as you go into science. So if you're off hours on the weekend and you're developing ideas, maybe originating from something that you are doing with the institution, that information you can develop as long as you keep it completely separated into an independent idea that can become part of a business. And so you need to investigate, if you're thinking along those lines of developing a biotech company, then you need to understand exactly how it is set up, because you want to do things right if you want to use one of your own ideas to profit yourself and not necessarily have to share it with other individuals. So it has to be done exactly correctly and legally so that you can do that. Remember, all that you have in science is your idea, your collective ideas. And as we proceed through the semester, we'll talk about disclosing ideas freely or not disclosing ideas. All you have are your ideas. If you give all of them away and everybody else uses them, then what do you have left? So that's the extreme example. But it fits right into this idea here, the openness, the open sharing of ideas and interpretations of data. So when do you disclose it and when do you keep it secret? If you're considering patenting something, if you publish it first, you're not going to be able to patent it. So what formats of public release of the information will negate the possibility of being able to patent something? We need money to live. We need money to buy gas. Very soon we might be paying $5 a gallon for gasoline, and no one will be coming to campus. You'll be all wanting to just take my online courses, right? For these reasons and many others, universities, funding agencies, research institutions, professional societies, and scientists are now very much aware of the importance of ethics in research. So there's a variety of responses to these ethical concerns: workshops, conferences, books, journals, articles, debates, formal courses and seminars, and of course, here at UTSA we have the formal course. And I really hope that over time I can get more of the seminar speakers that come to campus to be specialists or even have some degree of expertise to comment on content relevant to this course. So science as a profession. It's a definition of contemporary science as a provider of valuable goods and services. So scientists were not always viewed as professionals. Religious leaders and physicians were some of the first career individuals to be considered as professionals, but scientists definitely are considered as professionals now. So what happens when a career of an avocation becomes a vocation and a profession? There has to be a codified guide for regulating behavior. Without that, you can't assess what are the obligations and requirements of the professionals in that practice and how to evaluate their degree of professionalism and how to make judgments on their professional behavior if it deviates from the code of ethics, and how to impose the sanctions. You have to weigh the extent of the infraction of the codes and make the punishment to be appropriate. So the codes of ethics are part of one of the assignments that you have for the first assignment, and that's to go to the internet and see if you can find the code of ethics listed for a profession. So it may be a professional society, it may be NIH posting it as a basic code of ethics for scientists. There's a wide variety. You'll discover that many of them. Obviously, any of the healthcare professional fields will have their codes of ethics, but that's not what I'm asking you to look for. I'm asking you to look for the research codes of ethics, and primarily you're likely to find them posted by the professional societies or major funding agencies. So there's a short history of science prior and after the scientific revolution. I found it very interesting that it was noted in the textbook that there are more scientists alive today and practicing science as a profession than the total number of scientists that ever existed in the past 2,000, I think it was 2,500 years that was stated in there. So there are millions of scientists today around the world, and it's just a tremendous bulk of individuals, proportion of the world population, and therefore there's greater importance of understanding the profession in general. So prior to the scientific revolution, science was more of an avocation than a vocation. So the individual having some space and a compulsive interest, most likely in some aspect of science, or the naturalists with their notebooks and excellent drawings and all that type of stuff that we think about that tended to do it more for themselves out of that compulsiveness maybe, or deep genuine interest. And then some desire to share that knowledge with others because they tended to be educators. So it was more of an avocation, and it certainly has evolved to a professional vocation. And so now there's thousands of scientific societies and professional journals. It's so overwhelming, it seems impossible to stay on top of your area of interest. The textbook, the authors also note that early scientists were able to become experts and have significant reports and publications in several different disciplines. And now scientists are more likely to have a very highly specialized area within a narrow portion of one discipline, and rarely step into other area. If your science isn't focused, you will be criticized. You're less of a scientist if you aren't focused on one narrow area in science and you have just a handful of hypotheses on a poster that you carry with you wherever you go, and you push your handful of hypotheses forward forever. It's considered to be a weakness if you are more of a generalist in most cases. I don't want to overgeneralize it there. But especially if you're a faculty member going up for tenure review at an academic institution. If your research interests are diversified and not focused, you're going to receive a negative criticism, almost guaranteed. Science is now also a sizable part of the world's economy, and the modern age is a scientific age. So science should now be regarded as a profession, as we said. To understand the professional conduct in science, we need to have a better understanding of ethics in general, and that is, of course, why we will cover in the next lecture the basic concepts of ethics and ethical and moral theories as well in the lecture that supplements this. So research ethics can be understood according to the professional model. Excuse me. Professions have some common social and moral characteristics. So profession is more than an occupation, it's a career or a vocation. Professionals can be held publicly accountable. Professions are autonomous and self-regulating, and this is very important. You'll find clashes between professions and governing bodies, political bodies, so that the professions can sustain the self-regulating autonomy. And this very likely is to be one of the major reasons that the federal mandate through the National Institutes of Health was suspended, because the scientific professions should take care of themselves. The National Institutes of Health, which is part of the Public Health Service of the U.S. government, should not be telling professionals what they must do. It is a perfect stand to take. If we are professionals, we'll take care of ourselves. If you discover one of the members of our profession to be behaving in an appropriate fashion, then impose sanctions that you feel are appropriate at your level. If you discover it, tell us. If we discover it, we'll tell you. We'll impose our sanctions, you impose your sanctions, and we'll work together as a team to do it. But if there is to be any mandating, let it be through our professional code of ethics, because we are a profession autonomous and self-regulating. So you promote the self-regulation and the public responsibility, so that there is an independence of the profession from society in that sense. So the public expression of the Code of Ethics, the public posting of the Code of Ethics, is that honorable interface so that there is no secrecy. Professionals are recognized as having expertise. So they have come from these common social and moral characteristics. It's more than an occupation, it's a career or a vocation. Second, because professionals provide valuable goods and services, they have public responsibilities and can be held publicly accountable. So we keep repeating this, but it is extremely important. Third, and obviously in listing 4 things here, if there's going to be a quiz, which of the following is one of the 4 things, or not one of the 4 things that professions have some common social and moral characteristics. So third, although professionals have public responsibilities, they're also granted a great deal of autonomy, that's self-regulation. Fourth, the ethical standards play a key role in professional conduct by promoting the self-regulation and public responsibility. So then we can transition from this discussion of professions to the question of what is ethics. So if we're going to have a code of ethics for a profession, well then let's ask the question, what is ethics? You'll note that the authors say that it is possible and certainly academically and scholarly essential to distinguish between ethics and morality, but they're putting them into the one black box, if you will, and treating them as one concept. I will distinguish those in the lecture that supplements this. It is important to understand the distinction between ethics and morality. And just basically, ethics is more so the standard of guide for behavior to compare back to. So you use your ethics to make good judgment and to act appropriately. There certainly in the background are significant moral values and standards that are incorporated into generating the ethics. So we'll still keep in this lecture just the common idea of ethics. So the statements of 4 senses of the term compare and contrast ethics and law, ethics and politics, ethics and religion. So ethics is a branch of philosophy, and it can be considered as a standard of conduct, as I had stated. So it's kind of a guideline, a behavioral guideline or code that you can turn to compare what you are planning to do, are doing, or have done to assure that you are behaving or acting appropriately or making decisions appropriately. So it distinguishes between right and wrong, good and bad, evil and not evil, and so on and so forth. Ethics as an academic discipline that studies the standards of conduct. So we are less so interested in studying the standards of conduct, I mean, other than to become aware of them. We're studying them in this course, but we're not studying them to say, is this standard of conduct appropriate or correct, and try to review them and revise them. We'll be studying them just to try to remember a few terms related to standards of conduct. But it is a branch of philosophy, answers questions about duty, honor, integrity, virtue, and justice. These are virtues, these are terms that are based upon significant principles, the pillars of character. Do you abide by your duties? Do you have honor? Do you have integrity? Do you have virtues? And do you practice justice? These become very key aspects of becoming a professional in science, and integrity is one of the key principles in science without doubt, because any wavering from doing what is correct and appropriate and acceptable compromises your professional integrity. We have to do with how one ought to live or how society ought to be structured. So whenever we see ought, we think of obligation. Establish obligation, you establish duty. If obligation is not established in a situation or condition where there must be a decision or an act, then there is some freedom to have choices. And this is what we want to build on. How do we view ourselves? Do we live purely by rules? We don't make decisions unless they're guided by a rule or an act, some precedent, or do we allow ourselves a little more freedom to reason our way through situations? Or do we see ourselves, have we structured ourselves including a spectrum of all of these approaches to making decisions? Now, certainly we abide by the law, so that's where we're headed, to distinguish ethics from law. But in the non-litigious situation, when we are acting in science, when do we have a choice? Do we always allow ourselves to act with choice, or just by certain rules or precedents that are established? So ethics can be considered as an approach to decision making, and we'll go through those steps of ethical decision making as we go along. We'll see that it's very much the same when we talk about the approach to research. It almost follows a very similar pattern. So as I said, when we're trained as scientists, and this is the way it was considered in the past, we're professionals. We train other scientists in the profession, and the way that we train them to do science makes them a professionally ethical individual. That doesn't necessarily hold anymore, because the external factors outside of the profession and some of the internal factors, greed I think is more internal than external, can have significant impact. And there might be more reason to have desire for personal gain or even greed in science today, because the potential of making a fortune exists. Maybe that potential of making a fortune wasn't quite so prevalent in centuries ago. So it is key, as we see now. It's a state of character. Are you an ethical individual? Are you living up to the moral value system that is expected within your profession or of a citizen in general? Research ethics is a branch of applied ethics that studies the ethical problems that arise in the conduct of research. So we won't spend much time in this course discussing how we assess a moral individual who is ethical in the social sense outside of the context of research and the related responsibilities. Academically, ethics, of course, falls into the philosophy category, as we said, with certain subdivisions: theoretical ethics, meta-ethics, and applied ethics. And of course, this is the one we're going to be dealing with. Each of these are defined in the supplementary lecture that is provided in Module 1, Lecture 1. So, except for objectivism, this course doesn't look at the meta-ethics. And objectivism believes that the same ethics apply to everyone. So this discussion of objectivism gets into these other two areas. It's not quite applied ethics. It's asking questions about what is ethical and if standards are ethical. So it's more in the arena of theoretical and meta-ethics. But we do need to take a moment to ask ourselves about that. First, by considering moral relativism. So moral relativism means that there's different ethical standards that apply to different people in different situations. That there are no universal moral rules for values. So we can ask the question, is it ethical for U.S. scientists to have collaborations with scientists in foreign countries to perform research that is illegal by federal law in the United States? So you have a scientist who's an expert in embryonic stem cell research in the United States, cannot perform that type of research in the United States, but in another country they are allowing it. Is it ethical for that scientist to collaborate with another individual, or to set up a business in another country to exploit that area of science? So we have to ask these kind of questions. It's not they're not breaking U.S. law because they're not doing it on U.S. soil, but our society, reflected through our federal government's decisions, feels that it is illegal or so unethical that we have a moratorium on that type of research and don't provide public dollars to support it. Then is that ethical? If public dollars cannot support that kind of research, can private dollars support that kind of research on U.S. soil? So one of the key questions of meta-ethics is whether ethical standards indeed are universal. Should a researcher in a developing nation conduct research that violates Western standards even pertaining to informed consent, or that provides subjects with less than the Western standard of care? I mean, how many medicines, such as new birth control methods, have been developed in underdeveloped countries where population growth is so out of control that they need the assistance? So is it unethical to perform the initial large-scale clinical studies in those countries, especially where their healthcare standards cannot even come close to our substandard healthcare, but certainly standards of care? So we ask these types of questions, and of course we're not seeking answers at this point. We're just generating a feeling in our brain of the magnitude of the types of questions. So we go back to our science experiment at the bench, and we say, what's the ethical significance or importance of this? What impact on society might there be? Why am I taking this darn course? Why do I have to do this? Obviously, it's on a larger scale. Academically, ethics falls into philosophy with the subdivisions, as we had listed before. But although ethics and law sometimes overlap, they are not the same things, so we're going to compare them a bit. Sometimes ethics and law clash, for instance, with apartheid laws. Politics and ethics also overlap, but politics is much broader in scope. Many people base their ethics on religious teachings, but they are also not the same. So it's very important to consider each of these as we leave this very general overview of the topic on ethics. So laws are like ethical standards in several ways. Laws, like ethics, tell people how they ought to behave. So there's certainly no doubt that laws are obligatory. Ethical and legal standards share many concepts and terms. The methods of reasoning used in law and ethics are very much the same. When I present the lecture on reasoning, scientific reasoning, it'll be taken from a debate book that is used, it's a high school level one, that's used to introduce political reasoning to students at that level. But we use the same approach in ethics and in science. Ethics differ from laws in several ways also. So the actions or policies that are legal may still be unethical. So there's distinctions there. It's legal to kill criminals as a punishment, but we question whether that is ethical. That's certainly a prime example. Even laws can be evaluated from an ethical perspective, as I had stated. Ethical standards tend to be more informal and less arcane and convoluted than the legal standards. As well, the sanctions imposed by the legal system are different from those than the ethical system, although there can be overlap. But what we will discuss in other lectures is the sets of principles that apply to ethics. One of those is non-maleficence, and that is not to impose or allow harm to other individuals. And it is when the principle of non-maleficence is invoked that we cross from ethics to law. So if you misrepresent something in science and ultimately it leads to documented harm to individuals, humans or animals, then you have broken some kind of a law somewhere in there, could end up in jail or fined or whatever it would be. But under ethics, it'd be very unlikely that you would be fined. I mean, who collects the fine as a sanction imposed by ethics? But ethics certainly imposes the embarrassment, the marginalization, the discrediting, losing of licensure and things like that, taking away your right to practice. Distinguishing between ethics and politics. Politics, like ethics, deals with norms or standards of human conduct. Political questions tend to focus on broad issues having to do with the structure of society and group dynamics, and ethical questions tend to focus on more narrow issues than do the politics. So there's subtle distinctions, major distinctions, and some similarities. Distinguishing between ethics and religion. So they're both propose standards of human conduct and provide some account of the meaning of the value of life. People from different religious backgrounds can agree on some basic ethical principles and concepts, and the study of ethics is a secular discipline that relies on human reasoning to analyze and interpret ethical concepts and principles. So in closing on this slide, dealing with religion, we have to ask ourselves, can we be a scientist, a professional, can we be involved in science and the profession without our religious background and beliefs? And this is a very important aspect of that. Science as a profession is exclusive of religion. Practice of science is exclusive of religion. Doesn't mean that you can't be a religious person if you're a scientist, but religion is belief. If you're religious, you recognize that. It's faith. Science has nothing to do with faith. It's all questions, hypotheses, and then the objective approach to collect the data and draw conclusions only on the data, to have hypotheses and theories start off with the question and then build the support until someday they're accepted as fact, not as opinion. The overlap of belief, faith, especially religious-based, with the social implications of science makes it impossible to be a professional scientist and not have to deal with religion whatsoever. If you have a religious objection to doing something, then can you be a conscientious objector in science? Certainly in medical training, a classical example is if you're training as a physician and one of the required trainings is to perform an abortion, and religiously you object to that, do you perform the abortion as part of your training? In science, you're probably very less likely to encounter that type of a situation, but if you become interested in stem cell research, you have to face the question, will I use embryonic tissue from aborted fetuses in any of my research? So it is possible to encounter these types of conflicts between religion and science. So there have been times where I've worked with students, mostly undergraduate students of course, that have applied for research positions, and in their preliminary drafts of their statements of purpose and career objectives, say that it's from their religious beliefs that they want to help everyone, and I tell them you have to remove that, and it's very difficult for them to understand it at that point. So, well, being raised in a religious family and having the faith, I'm committed to helping other individuals, and that's what science is all about. We contribute knowledge and we contribute discoveries that have direct benefit to humans and animals, nature, and the universe, but it's from the perspective of the intrinsic value of the contribution of new knowledge and fact, not from the perspective of a religious-based morality. I know it sounds like I'm on the soapbox there, but it's important to state that, and this is the slide where we state it and then we don't deal with it again in the course. Personal decision about who you are and what will be the structure of your personal and professional integrity is left up to you. You inculcate into your character what you pick up from individuals and social institutions throughout your life. You're all advanced enough in your years to understand that and know that that is true. With this course, I assume that most of the students have not taken very many philosophy courses, ethics courses, and the purpose, the objective is to put forth through readings, and you'll see most of the lectures are simply reading the slides, enough information so that you have the opportunity to gain more knowledge and terminology in this area, and to inculcate certain specific ideas into your background, and possibly have a better understanding of who you are ethically, especially in the setting of science. No intention to generate expertise, as I had stated, just an opportunity to move forward in your moral and ethical development as a human being, especially in the context of science. So I appreciate your time and attention, and that is the completion of our lecture today.